Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and as usual, we got an amazing episode for you today. Today, we're actually connecting with Phil Mendoza. Phil is the owner of No Limits Archery in Denver, Colorado. He's also the founder of the Mile High Hunt Expo, which is an expo coming up here in April in Denver. Check it out, guys. I'm going to put links to everything in the show notes. There's also a discount code, our first ever discount code, because this is going to be the event that changes all of outdoor events. It's going to be fun, and if you're in the Denver area, hit me up. I'd love to go with you. Just make sure you use my discount code. Beyond that, guys, I do want to apologize. I've recently taken a new role, and I've had some transition in the equipment that I use, and I just learned in listening to this episode, the audio isn't great, so I apologize for that. I'm going to have about 3 episodes with poor quality, but then I'll get right back to where I was, so sorry. But you know what? Let's go ahead and kick this thing off, and let Phil tell you some of his stories. Thank you. All right, Phil. Welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast, man. How are you?
Hey, good, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. I'm super excited to have you here. You are the owner of my favorite bow shop. I didn't know that when I started going there, but why don't we start with this, Phil? Why don't we, before I tell my story about your bow shop to the listeners and why they should go to a good quality bow shop, why don't you introduce yourself to the folks listening today?
Yeah, my name is Phil Mendoza. Born and raised in Colorado. I grew up in a outdoor kind of, my family is very much involved in the outdoors, I guess is the best way to say that. And my dad raised me rifle hunting, fishing in the summertime. He was a entrepreneur, and I was born into that, I would say, from a young age. So it was something that there wasn't a ton of time for the hunting and the fishing trips, but it really, I took to a very early age, and I've raised my family the same way. And so grew up rifle hunting, went to college, played a couple years of junior college baseball. Once I got done with baseball, that's when I got into archery. And
Okay.
that was, I played with the bow a little bit with some of my buddies and stuff in high school, but never really took the dive, So
Yeah.
I was 20, 21 years old and been pretty successful, pretty lucky hunting with the rifle for years. So my uncle and I was like, we're going to start this archery game. We got to give this a shot, So I took the dive. I went out, bought a bow, and I started shooting. Man, I tell you what, it was like I was living single. I was living alone at the time. I was not married.
Yeah.
I started finding different ranges, and I was 4 or 5 nights a week. I was in the range shooting.
That's
So
awesome.
the bug bit me bad. A lot of people tell me similar stories, right? So I just got so immersed in just learning everything I could. I started competing in some local 3D shoots, probably 2005 timeframe, somewhere around there. And by 2008, I was hitting all the circuits I could around Colorado, Triple Crowns, mostly 3D. And in 2009, I started competing at the ASA circuit. And that's the same year that I opened my bow shop. And so I earned my way through the amateur classes in ASA. 2014, I think I won into the pro class. So I earned my way into the pro class. I only shot there for about half a season. My wife had our second son at that point. And
That'll do it.
I've been running the archery shop. I've been helping my family run a family-owned business since I got out of college. And doing the tournament thing was a lot. So I chose a family route. I'm glad I did. It's been good, but the shop, man, I tell you, it's been it started as a side gig. It's evolved into its own animal, which in a good reason, a good way. But I'm blessed to have good employees and a good staff there that takes care of the customers like I would like to take care of the customers.
100%. Yeah, it's top notch, guy. I mean, I'm not kidding when I say that, Phil. I went in there. I told you briefly. I'll tell the story just so the listeners can hear it. But I bought a brand new bow. I bought a junker bow from, you probably know Parker, right? They went out of business. So I just waited until they were liquidating because I have a 31.5-inch draw and I'm lefty. So I was like, it'll always have giant left-handed bows. I waited until they were like $200. Started shooting and was like, I love this. And so then I saved up to buy a bow, went to your shop because they had the most that I could try. And that was the first time I'd ever been. But I ended up buying a Hoyt RX-7 Ultra. And your staff basically was like, "Are those your arrows?" And they're like, "Can we see them?" And they were looking at my arrows, and they're like, "We won't sell you this bow if those are the arrows you're going to shoot out of it, because your bow will explode. And I was like, what are you even talking about? Just thinking they were trying to upsell me
Yeah.
these arrows. Your boys were like, no, you're spined incorrectly. Like, it's basically like you're dry firing your bow every time you shoot. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this is the same specs as my other bow. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So I left thinking you guys were trying to upsell me, to be completely honest.
Sure.
But I
Yeah.
went home, started Googling around, started looking into it, looking at my draw length, the speed, and all the different things. And I was like, they were right. I'm like underspined by like almost 100. Like, it was dangerous what I had been doing. And I'll be honest, I went into another shop up north of where we are right now. Won't mention, they're actually out of business at this point. Weird. But I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is my bow. Set me up, and that's what they set me up with. So I'll just reiterate to the listeners, man, getting a really good bow shop like Phil's bow shop, No Limits Archery in Denver, is super important because you can hurt yourself.
Yeah, man. And it's one of those things, like I said, sometimes, anything hunting related, there's ego involved, right?
Yep.
And this is where, if anything, my biggest challenge with my staff, and this is just full disclosure, maybe sharing more information than I need to, is that I would say that we're right 95, 98% of the time. We're not
Yeah.
right all the time, you know what I mean? But we're right
No one
most of the
is.
time because we consult with the manufacturers, we consult with sales reps, we really learn what we're supposed to learn, and we go in depth with this stuff. But we get it wrong sometimes. But because we do have that background with the education, sometimes it can come off like you're being arrogant when you're really trying to guide the customer in the right way,
Yeah,
because
100%.
that's where it's a difficult industry if people perceive what you're saying with ego and attitude. And that's where I just try to get my guys to understand. It's like, look, you're probably right with what you're wanting to relay to the customer, but you really have to take a step back sometimes and mellow out the conversation, mellow out the delivery
Yeah,
sometimes, because it's really easy to get perceived as being an a-hole, and
for sure.
and it is what it is.
Yeah, I will say your guys were at no point a-holes. I just thought they were trying to upsell me. I did go back in, walked right up to Bo, who's the guy working with me, and I was like,
Yeah.
my bad. You were right. I need those new
Yeah.
arrows. So let's get that started. So either way, we've gone off track, Phil. Thank you for letting me tell my little archery story because
Yeah. No
I've
worries.
since then I've been like super particular. I moved to Texas for a year, and I was like, no, I'm not just going to any shop. I went to one shop that I heard the guy drew guns on people just because I had to get arrows
Oh,
cut, and the guy nearly drew a gun on me, and I was like, well, this is exactly what I thought I would get. But either way, let's get to the meat and potatoes of the episode here, man.
yeah, for
You've been
sure.
hunting a while. Why don't you set the stage for the first story today?
Yeah. So I guess I'll tell you, this one's one of my more memorable ones, and honestly, on an emotional standpoint, because a good friend of mine who helped me at the shop for a long time passed away a few years back. And this was one of the last hunts that I got to share with him. Even though it was brief, he really helped a ton. And he was this kind of guy. I mean, anybody who knew my friend Joe, that, like I said, I'll just leave it at that. But um, he was the type of guy that was the happy guy in the group, super helpful, well connected.
Yeah.
So, long story short, this was my dad's sheep hunt. My dad's bighorn sheep hunt from here in Colorado a few years back, and my buddy Joe was elk hunting in the same unit where my dad drew his sheep tag. So over the counter archery elk, and my dad drew his sheep tag, which it was a rifle tag, but through September, right? And so my buddy had just told me, he's like, hey, I'm going to keep an eye. If I see the sheep come down a little bit lower when I'm hunting, I'm going to call you. You need to be ready to head down here in a hurry, right? If they start moving down where we can get to, otherwise we'll just hunt them a little bit later in the season. So long story short, I think it's the last day of over the counter elk,
Okay.
and the day before that, I'm sorry. So he called me up and he says, hey, what are you doing? I said, well, we're actually going to head down that way just to go scout and see if we can get in any animals here tomorrow sometime. He says, you need to be here in the morning. I'm like, well, we weren't planning on being there in the morning, but what's going on? He said, a band of 5 rams just came down. He said, I'm glassing them up. He said, they're probably 3/4 of a mile from where I'm hunting. He said, but they're just hanging out on this knoll. It's a stockable area. If they don't go far, this would be a great opportunity for your dad. Now, my dad is just shy of 70 years old now. He
Okay.
is he's a guy that his mind tells him he wants to keep going, and his body's starting to show some limitations, right?
His body's
But
not agreeing fully, but yeah.
well, but my dad can go. He can still go. He's just limited on his pace now.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, awesome. We fly down there that afternoon, and I had my gear already, and it was ready to go. So long story short, we meet up with Joe in the morning at the trailhead, and he's still elk hunting, and he's hunting in the same area. So he said, I'm going to get you guys in position. If they're there, I'm going to let you do your thing. If I'm into elk, then I'm going to go hunt elk because it's the last day of the season. But if I'm not, then I'm going to help you. So we start hiking in. We probably hiked in about a mile, and we got to this vantage point where we were going to be able to see up the mountain. And so we hike in about a mile, and it's just the lights just starting to get daylight, and there's elk screaming everywhere. I mean,
Of
I'm
course.
telling you, there's bulls, 4 or 5 bulls, no kidding, within a half a mile of where we're at in this little basin. And I told him, I said, we need to get set up now. I said, you need to, where can you set up to shoot? I said, I'll sit back and call. I got my calls on me. And he's like, no, just relax, He said, we're going to go a little further because it was just light enough to see, but I can hear the elk everywhere, man. And it was, I'm telling you, when it sounds like a Primo's video, it's just, that's what it sounded like.
Yeah.
So we still couldn't see any elk yet, but they were close. So we kept hiking up, and we're hiking through oak brush. And it's, when you got oak brush over your head, you can't see half the time where you're going anyway. So he's got trails cut out and marked out. So we're going through these cutouts, and we get to a little bit more of a vantage point, and all of a sudden you can see on the side of the hillside of the mountain, I don't know, 70, 80 elk that I'm seeing scattered around the mountain.
No way.
and then there's bulls that are even closer now. And I told him, I said, Joe, he's like, no, we can see the sheep from just up here. Let's just go further. I'm like, the sheep can wait. Let's see if we can get a shot on one of these bulls, And my dad's just sitting, he's sitting there loving it. He loves hunting, period, especially when you're in that interaction like that. So he's like, no, just relax, Phil. Let's just keep going. So like, okay. So we hiked about another 150 yards, and I'm kidding you, I hear elk crashing through the timber below me, less than 100 yards. And it's so thick that he knew the area, and that's where he was patient with it. But I finally told him, we got to a little bit of a clearing. I said, get over there. I said, I'm going to sit back here and call. And sure enough, I hung back, and I just start cow chirping, a couple light bugles, and one of these bulls comes up, and then another bull comes up to him, and I see him go to full draw. He's about 50 yards in front of me, and he shoots, and you hear the arrow crash through the oak brush. He hit a limb, arrow went sailing. Bull go crash, they go crashing out. And so I hiked back over to him, and he's like, yeah, I missed. I hit a branch, but that's all right. He said, let's keep going. So we keep hiking up the mountain, and we got about another, I'd say about half a mile up, and the bigger herd bull was kind of moving the other way. And I mean, it was awesome. Just, when you see elk in their habitat, in the rut, it's something that people need to experience if they haven't experienced it.
And even with a herd that big, that's crazy.
Man, I'm telling you, there was no less than 6 or 7 bulls in there. Some satellite, smaller bulls. They weren't all trophy bulls, but it's the interaction, right? It was super fun. So we get up the hill a little bit more, and he goes, look up there. And I start glassing up, and I can see the sheep, I'm like, oh, nice. So we start watching, and I'm glassing, I'm looking, and I'm like, there's a couple 3/4 curl rams in there. And I had already taken my ram a couple years previous. I'm not a seasoned bighorn sheep hunter by any means, but I'd spent quite a few days on the mountain with my hunt and scouting and learning about what I could. So getting into position, trying to get my dad in position for the best ram he could take. I knew that he wasn't going to be able to go for days on end chasing sheep in sheep country. So I was really hopeful that we'd have the right situation the first time, for his sake, because my hunt was a grind in a different unit that was anything but forgiving. But we hiked up a little bit further on the mountain, and there was bull elk again screaming right below us. So again, I told Joe, I said, get by that bush over there. I'm going to get back here, and I'm going to call. And he says, all right. So I backed up, called a bull, and he shot a bull 35, 40 yards, and the bull takes off down the mountain. And at that point, I hiked back up to him, and he's like, yeah, I think it's a pretty good hit. So he just kind of pointed me in the direction. He said, if you get up here a little further, he said, it's kind of like a hogback ridge. They're on this other ridge. If you stay on the backside of the second ridge, he said, you can hike all the way up the mountain. So I was like, okay, that's what we're going to do. So that was the plan. Joe went after his bull that he had put an arrow in. And my dad and I start hiking up the mountain. And it was one of those deals where it wasn't that far. I mean, we're probably a half a mile of a hike up the mountain to where we can get into and it's a rifle tag. So we should be able to get a shot. So this is where, I mean, my dad's my hero for many things, like a lot of kids, right? Because he set the tone for me in my life for many things, work, just life, risk taking, so many things. So we're hiking up this mountain, and as I'm hiking, I got all the gear on my pack, and he's pretty light, which I wanted it that way. I'm like, okay, here we go. So I'm hiking up, and I just start trucking up the hill, thinking he's right behind me. So I go up about 100, 150 yards, and I turn back, and he's about halfway down. He'd only made about half the distance.
Yeah.
And it was fairly steep, kind of rocky a little bit, but it wasn't like above tree line hunting. It was just at the edge of it. And so I was like, oh, I got to take this slower. He needs more time. So I would do that. I just kind of waited for him to catch up. Hey, you good, Dad? He goes, yeah, I'm good. He says, just need a little break, So I was like, okay. So at that point, it was one of those deals where, appreciating that moment, because we don't know how many more hunts we have, right? 100%. But having that with him and understanding that I was 100% confident I was going to get him in place for a shot, but I just needed to take it. If it was me, man, I would have charged up the mountain. I'd have been up there ready in minutes and finding a rest and picking out but I'm like, I gotta really take this. I got to figure this out differently and take a different approach. So I'd hike up about 50, 75 yards. I'd get in a glassing position. I'd glass, get eyes on the rams again, make sure that they hadn't gone anywhere, make sure that, I was really studying to see which one we were going to try to shoot. Meanwhile, my dad would catch up to me, sit there for a minute with him, a minute or two. Then I'd start going up the mountain again. So I did this about 5 or 6 times. And probably the last or second to last time, he had ran out of his water because he had brought 2 bottles of water. We dropped his pack down below. He had a smaller pack, and I carried the rest. So I'm giving him some more water. And, he was just taking it slow. He knew his pace. He knew how quick he can go. And it was good, man, because it was one of those deals where I had to sit back and be more patient with it. But it was something I got to enjoy that stalk with him. And so once we get up, it was the last kind of climb I was going to make. I knew when I came over the top of that hogback, I was going to be somewhere between 150 and 200 yards of these rams, which was in range. But it was going to be, where are we going to get the shot from at this point? Where are we going to sneak up from? So I kind of start working my way up, and I purposely got up a little bit ahead of him again, so I can scope it out. I can see which tree or bush or whatever we needed to get behind. And I got in there, and I snuck up, and I had my tripod with my video camera, set it up behind this bush, and I'm watching these rams, and I'm just glassing them, and I picked out the bigger of the 2 3/4 curl rams. And there was a couple other ones that are about 5/8 curl, and I got in position. I told my dad. I backed up, and I went. I met him about 30 yards away from where I was in position, and I said, "All right, Dad." I said, "We're going to hike up to this bush." I said, "I got my stuff set up on the left side. You go to the right side of it." I said, "And then use your shooting sticks." I said, "Just get set up." I said, "It's the second ram on the left side. It's the second one from the end. They're laying down right now, right?"
Perfect.
And it was perfect, right? So, and he says, "Okay." He says, "Give me a minute." So he sits there, and he sits on the rock, just patient. And my dad's
catching his breath.
That's it, and it was one of these things that since I was a kid, patience. He's always, when I was fishing, I was impatient. You need to have patience. You need to have patience, So it was one of those minutes where those times where he sat there, and we didn't say anything to each other. We just understood, okay, this is going to happen. We just need, let's let it happen. Just take our time. So he starts hiking up. We start hiking up to this bush. I had dropped my pack at this point. Well, it seemed like a storm was starting to blow in, and the fog was coming down off the mountain. and it was coming down in waves, right? A big patch of fog would come down, and then about 15, 20 seconds later, it would break up. It would move off. So as we crept up to this bush, big fog cloud starts coming down. I'm like, perfect. They can't see us. I'm going to get him in position. I walked him up to the bush, and I'm like, Dad, just set up right there. There's another bush about 10 yards in front of him. And I'm like, just get between these two bushes, and you should be good right here. And he looks at me, and he sees the fog. He goes, I'm going to get in front of that other bush. And I said, Dad, it's 10 yards. You're 175 yards or 180 yards from the shot. That's not going to make any difference, you know?
Yeah.
And he says, no, I'm going to get to that bush right there. I'm like, okay. So
I don't know if
backed
I'm
up.
excited or worried about what's about to happen, but go ahead.
Well, so I tell you, right? It's one of those things. I back up and I just said, I got my video camera rolling. I got my glass. I'm watching these rams. They're bedded down. Or the fog had came in, but they were bedded down before the fog came in. So there my dad goes. He's creeping around the outside of the bush, and he's whisper quiet going around inside the bush. Well, he sits there, and all of a sudden the fog clears, and he starts making noise trying to set up his shooting sticks.
Oh, no.
Kicking a little rock, a little rustling going on there. And I'm watching these rams, and I'm listening, right? I'm not even looking at my dad. I'm like, man, what is he doing? Hopefully he gets set up quickly. But one of the rams starts looking our direction. I'm like, oh, no.
Oh.
So then he couldn't get his shooting sticks low enough is what happened. You know, he sits down on the ground to try to take a shot, put his shooting sticks in front of him. Well, he couldn't get it low enough. He put his rifle on it. The rifle's pointing up in the sky. So then he put his rifle down. He tried to move the shooting sticks again, making too much noise. So then he folds his shooting sticks up, set them aside. He starts breaking branches on this bush.
Oh, no.
Okay. My dad's one of these guys that he's always said, you need a good rest when you shoot, you know, get on a Y of a tree or do this. So he was getting his rest ready. And at this point, one of the rams stood up. And I'm like, no. Oh, no, you know. Then another ram stands up. Then another ram stands up. Well, pretty soon all 5 rams are standing up looking at us, and the fog rolls in. And I'm sitting there with my fingers crossed, praying that they were still going to be there when the fog cleared. Because all this noise, we got their attention. They knew something was up, and I'm just waiting. It seemed like an eternity. It was probably like 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And as soon as the fog clears, my dad's already in his position, and I'm whispering to him, Dad, it's still the second one from the left. Still the second one from the left. Well, this ram's quartering to us pretty hard. And as soon as the fog clears, sure enough, they're still staring right at us, you know. Lucky enough. And he gets a shot off. Didn't make the best shot the first time. The rams ran actually down the hill towards us. He put a second shot onto it, and it was done deal. But it was one of those things that it was, man, the little thing, right? I mean, it took me back to when I was a kid hunting with my dad, and we rifle hunted. And we hunted a lot of oak brush country. But when we'd get set up on a vantage point, whatever, my dad would sit there with his Rambo knives, because that's what he's got these big old knives I don't even know what kind of knives they are, you know.
Yeah.
Hanging off the side of his belt. And he would sit there and hack branches and make a little blind, or get himself ready, get his shooting, his shooting benches or rests set up in case something was to pass by. Well, man, that's what he was doing here, you know. And I joked with him afterwards too. I said, what were you making so much noise for? He goes, well, if I can't get a shot, what good is it? And he said, if I can't get a good rest. So it was one of those deals, man, that it all worked out. I called Joe. He hiked up. He helped us get the ram off the mountain, and we packed it out. And then he went back to keep tracking his bull. And it was one of those things that, with his help, it was a great day from start to finish. Beginner's luck maybe with my dad with his ram, but it was one of those hunts that it's a super memorable trip for me, because I got to share it with a good friend. He got us in position. My dad waited 14 years to draw his ram tag here in Colorado, and we got it done on the first trip out. And I was thankful for that, because I didn't know, when I seen him hiking up that hill on that stock, I knew that I at that point, I was like, he can't do this for 4, 5, 6 days in a row. We need to make it count. And he shot a great 3/4 curl ram, man. So it was a great trip. And like amazing. I said, it was one of the last trips I got to hunt with Joe. but it was a good trip for sure.
Yeah, man, Phil, you had me worried there though for a minute. I was a little concerned. Usually when people start throwing in random details, it's like, uh-oh, things are turning the wrong direction. But that is a great story, and it's a super cool hunt, especially something you were able to do with your dad.
Yep.
And it's I bet he tells everyone he knows every detail, and how he made the perfect rest, even though my son Phil was gawking at me to get that thing shot.
I've got my video camera going. I still have that hunt. I've worked on editing bits and pieces of it, but I was cursing on the camera a couple times.
I bet.
Pretty quiet. I was like, "Holy shit! I hope this. I hope he doesn't screw this up." And so I haven't put anything together with it yet, just because it's one of those deals. I almost really appreciate the memory because I just
Yeah,
can relive it. But I do have the video footage of it too, so maybe one day I'll throw it up and get to let other people share in that adventure as well. But no, man, it was a really cool trip, and like I said, blessed to have been able to connect the dots early on that one.
for sure. And you said your buddy, you just mentioned it briefly, but back to tracking his bull. Did
Yeah,
he get one?
he shot it. It went off onto so we were hunting. Um, Where he ended up shooting that bull was probably about a half a mile from where some private property starts below,
Okay.
and he tracked it to private. And when we came out, he ended up going in trying to make some calls to get access in there, and he couldn't get access to go finish
Is that
tracking
the
his
same
bull.
bull that you saw him go full draw on, or was there another one
That's
later?
what he shot. Yeah, so he hit that
Okay.
bull. So before we started making our stock, and I called that bull. We seen him on the mountain, and I called him down the mountain for him, and he came up and he shot him at 35 yards. If anything, it was slightly quartering to, not perfectly broadside, and that's why I think that bull made it a little fur. I think it was a one lung hit,
Yeah.
but because before we went up, I went down where his hit site was. We found blood within about 30 yards,
Hmm.
and so we that was one of those stories that it's frustrating to when when you don't recover an animal
Yeah.
because of other people not allowing you to recover an animal, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what that was. That was a tough deal, but um, I mean,
Yeah.
you bow hunt long enough, you're going to run into stories like that too.
Do you think the landowners like just let it lie and never checked in on it, or do you think they went out there and broke it down and took advantage of his hard work?
Where that specific property was, I would almost bet they probably let it lie.
That's too
You
bad.
know, and there's
That's too
there's
bad.
so many bears and stuff down there too that I bet they just figured, like, we'll go shoot a bear off that carcass here in a couple of days.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
is probably what the mentality was. But I can't say for sure. I didn't speak with the landowners. It was
Gotcha.
kind of, I was getting the information as we were driving back home, but because he had other help down there as well. That's where we ended up clearing out, just because I knew he had family and some other
Okay.
friends down there that were going to help him with the afternoon. But yeah, so kind of that. If anything, that kind of put a damper in that whole weekend. That was that,
Yeah.
but still a good trip for sure.
Yeah. Still an amazing story, and I bet even your friend who lost that bull still probably enjoys telling that story, even though it's nature of archery, right? Inevitably, everyone loses an animal. It's just gonna happen.
Yeah, for sure.
So, well, that was great, Phil. That was a fun story. What else you got for us? It's always hard to transition from like one great story to like, all right, next.
Yeah,
But
no. So
what do you
I'll tell
got?
you. I'll tell a story. um, my son, he's my older son. He's been kind of in my hip pocket since he was about 6 or 7, big game hunting with me. And his
Wow,
first
that's cool.
experience, yeah, his first experience elk hunting. Um, I pulled my camping trailer up, my wife and my older son, and my younger son. He was already, I think, 2 years old at the time. Uh, so I was like, look, I'm going to go hunt the morning. If I don't get in anything, I'll hike back out, have lunch with you guys, and then I'm going to come back and get Dominic, my oldest son. I'm going to take him in. There's a spot that wasn't too far. I'm like, I've seen elk in there. Hopefully, I can get him to see an elk or hear something. So we did that afternoon. I went and had lunch with my wife and my boys, and then I took Dominic with me, and we drove up into the property we are going to hunt, and we hiked in. It wasn't far, maybe half a mile,
Okay.
and I got to this lower meadow that again, sometimes I'm passing through that meadow in the morning, and I said, I'm just going to set up here. So I hiked up to it, and I got to a edge of this aspen grove, and I'm looking, and I see elk in that meadow, and I'm like, holy crap, he's going to see his first elk at 6 years old in the wild, like,
Yeah.
legitimate hunt. And so as I'm telling him, I said, Dom, there's some elk up here. I'm going to pick you up so you can see. I said, you got to try not to move. You got to be real still. I said, we're going to try to call to him, see if we can get into him. Well, as I'm reaching down to pick him up, the bull bugles, and I couldn't see a bull in there. But he looks up at me, and his eyes were like saucers, man. He's like,
Yeah.
is that? I was like, that's a bull, buddy. That's a bull, So that was his first experience at a very young age. So this was probably, I think he was 11 or 12. The fast forward a few years now, and I took him
Let
with
me
me.
pause you real quick, Phil, because I
Okay.
have a 5-year-old, and so hearing you taking a 6-year-old out,
Oh yeah.
first off, is an exciting concept, but also I don't understand the math behind taking a 6-year-old out. So like, how did he do? Was he like how was the hiking? How was he as far as being quiet? Just how was the overall experience? Like, how would you say about that?
The quiet thing, I'd say um, it was that was the biggest challenge, if you will, because it's just questions, right? The kids are like, "What's that, Dad? Where are we going here?
Yeah.
How much farther are we going?" Right? So that's where it was like, okay, let's. What I ended up doing was it was like I'd tell him, "Hey, son, let's not talk. Let's wait till we stop where we're going, and then you can ask me whatever questions you want." Right? So
Yeah.
that way, I'd stop in a place where we can talk if we needed to, and then we'd walk another 100 or 200 yards, and then stop again. So the questions thing was definitely interesting. Both my kids are. I'm blessed to have super athletic kids. My oldest Dom, he just won a state wrestling tournament
Oh,
yesterday.
congratulations, man.
Thank you. So he's a beast to say the least. So from a hiking standpoint, even at a young age, he's I've never really I've had to limit how far I would go, but as far as pace or anything like that, he's been with me from a young age.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, and my youngest son, he's the same way. I mean, they're they can move pretty good. Both of them can. They're both very athletic kids, and so when it came time to where I was taking him for like days at a time, it was no issues. It was more along the lines of we'd go somewhere, I'd want to sit in a vantage point and be able to call or glass, whatever, and my son would be like, "Why are we stopping here? We need to go over there. We need to keep going." So
Yeah. Okay.
it was more of that side of it, and I think I was lucky too to have put him in situations where he saw animals early, he got interactions early. I started taking him turkey hunting when he was 6 in
Yeah.
Nebraska. He actually
Okay.
shot his first turkey at 6 with a crossbow because he couldn't hit the youth stock shotgun was too long for him. So I was able to, again, owning the bow shop, right? I knew that there was a crossbow stock that I can get shorter, and it was short enough for him. Well, he shot a turkey with his crossbow. There's some people that don't like crossbows, but I'm more of the opinion of, if I'm going to take a kid out hunting and give him the best opportunity to be successful, if that's what the tool is, and it worked for him,
Yeah.
he's shot multiple deer with his compound bow now. He shot deer with his rifle. So it was a good bridge for him
Yeah.
because he was ready to hunt. He just wasn't big enough to shoot anything else,
Yeah. Do you still have that
So
crossbow?
do I still have it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah,
All right. I might need to borrow it. I'm thinking about
yeah.
taking my son turkey hunting this year.
Man, I tell you what, it's a blast. And like I said, there's certain things. Knowing the right tools for the application
Yeah.
is a big plus. So yeah, this fast forward, I took him elk hunting. He had been with me on many trips, but he hadn't seen me harvest anything. Right?
Mhm.
I would end up harvesting animals when the weekend he wasn't with me or something else, and so there was years that went by where he just was like, "Dad, I want to see you shoot something," and I just haven't, So I think the year before he saw me shoot a cow, and now he's like, "Dad, I want to see you shoot a bull. I want to see you shoot a bull." So we go hiking up, and we got into one of these with a couple different areas I hunt. We had hiked up, and it was a transition area, is what I'd call it. I mean, I whitetail hunt a lot, so I kind of categorize areas sometimes similar how verbiage for whitetail hunting is,
Okay. Yeah.
bedding, transition, whatever, feed. So we're in this transition area, and I'd called elk in there before many times, and my brother shot one of his biggest bulls in this meadow. I'm like, this would be a good spot to set up. So we get there early, got some dead branches, some limbs, some down limbs, and we kind of created a little brush blind. And I knew if elk come down off this area, they're coming down right from bedding before they go down to feed in some of these meadows below. We'd have a good chance that 30 minutes to 45 minutes before shooting light was over. So we sat there, and my son he just wants to hear the calls. He wants to hear me call. So I start calling a little bit. It was early, didn't hear nothing. About 45 minutes, an hour goes by, and I start calling again. Well, I did a calling sequence, cow calls mostly, a couple light bugles, and then a few minutes go by, I cow call again a few times. Well, I heard something above us, like a rock, like when you hear a hoof on a rock or it kicks a rock or something, and I heard something, and I told him, I was like, hey, I hear something up here. I'm pointing up the mountain, I'm giving him the hand signals, I'm pointing at my ear and then pointing up the hill, and I was like, gotta be quiet, And he was good. At this point, he's kneeling down in the little brush blind we had. I got my video camera going. I always try to video what I can, sometimes I don't always get it, but got the video camera going, and then cow chirped a few more times. Well, then I hear another rock kick closer, and I'm like, oh, something's coming. Don't know what it is yet. Hadn't made any noise. Something's coming. So I got my arrow loaded on my bow, and then, turn the video camera on. I'm pointing in that direction. And at this point where we were sitting where the tree line was, we're probably about 30 yards to the trees, somewhere in that ballpark. And a bull starts coming down the mountain, and he's probably inside 100 yards now. And I just hear you just hear the rocks kicking the branches, and he's walking slow, but he's coming in and hadn't made a sound. This is for opening weekend of the season, mind you, too. So they weren't really ramped up or anything.
Yeah.
So bull starts coming
curious.
down. Yeah, exactly what it was, right? So he's coming down, and I'm looking through the trees, and it's kind of pines in this area. We're above the aspens. It's more pines and kind of open, sparse in places. And I can see his rack coming through the trees. And I'm like, oh, he's a shooter. I don't know how many points he's got, but he's a shooter bull. So he comes, and the one tree that's directly between me and the direction he was coming, he's walking, keeping that tree between us. Like he knew where I was, right? He pinpointed my location.
Yeah.
Must have, but from hundreds of yards up the hill. And I'm sitting there, I got my, I'm camoed out, face painted, and I'm waiting. Well, when I see him come in about 50 yards, coming down, and he's walking slowly, but he's walking, I'm like, I got to draw my bow because I don't know when I'm going to be able to. Once he clears this tree either side, he's inside of 40 and I have a shot. So I drew my bow. He continues to walk. Well, he stops, and I got my video camera rolling right below me as I'm standing, and I have another video camera going on my stabilizer.
Oh, cool.
So I got two cameras going, and this bull stops looking at me, or looking down through me, I should say, right behind this tree. So I'm at full draw, and it was over 2 minutes I'm at full draw because I checked it when I viewed the camera. 80-pound bow. I'm sitting there, and I'm telling you what, I knew I'm going to have to let down. My arm was starting to tremble a little bit, my front shoulder. And I said, as soon as I get the big trembles, then I'm going to make too much noise. I'm going to spook him. So I'm as slowly as I can trying to let the bow down. But as soon as it breaks over the cam, it kind of gives that little jerk forward.
Yep.
Well, the bull spooked back, and he kind of spooked back into the trees, and I started immediately cow calling. Well, he starts to circle us as he's going around us and down the hill. Wind was in our favor. Everything's perfect still from that standpoint. He just saw some movement but didn't know what we were. So he's circling us to the edge of the tree line. And there was this really distinct there was two aspen trees. Like we were right at the transition from the aspens to the pines. And there was two aspen trees that had almost like a Y to it, like a V, I should say, at the bottom. But I ranged it at 39 yards. And this bull circled around, and he starts coming back as I'm cow calling. And I turn my video camera, I'm pan over, and I get him in frame, a little bit at the distance. And he stops right behind that aspen. And I'm telling you, I can see about a 4-inch gap.
Yeah.
And I can see because I see him in front of the tree and behind the tree, and I knew it was right behind his shoulder. And so he moved just a little bit, and I can see his shoulder, and I put my 40-yard pin right on there, and I just let it rip. And I hammered him perfect. So he barrels down the mountain, and he goes. I see him go downhill about 20 yards, and I didn't know if he had jumped down off of a little bench or as the hill went rolling down, or the mountain, I should say. And and I lost sight of him. So I'm looking at Don. We're all hyped up, kind of hugging each other, and he's all just adrenaline, right? And I'm adrenaline rush too, because this had just went down, and he was a good bull, and so we waited there, and he's like, Dad, when can we go? I was like, no, we got to wait, as much as I don't want to, we got to wait. So we waited there for a while. We sat, we kind of replayed, what happened, and he's excited, and I videotaping him at this point, getting his reaction to the whole deal. And so finally we decided it was time to start picking up the trail. And immediately I said, I know the tree that I shot him at. He barreled straight back off the mountain from there. I said, let's just go to that tree and let's see what we can see. So I walk up there, I'm videotaping it, and I get to that tree, and I look down, and I can see him about 30 yards down the hill. Dead.
Oh, man, that's amazing.
So he didn't, I heart shot him, and he was down in seconds. He probably died within 10, 15 seconds from when I hit him, because when he went down, he fell right there.
Yeah.
So we go down there, and he was a giant 5x, man. He was just shy of 310 5x5.
Wow, that's a big 5x5.
Big, yeah. One of his sides is kind of petering off a little sixth on the one side, but I just like to say he's a 5x, because to see a 5x that big, and that's where it was one of those deals. That was one of my best bulls to that time, because he's just huge on the front end, big thirds. Had he been a true 6, he's been pushing, mid 320s to 330 all day long. And we go down there, and it was really cool, because it was right before dark, and I started going to work. And my son, since he was young, he wants a pocket knife. He wants to help skin the animals. So first thing, he just flicked out his knife, and there we go. He's helping me, right? I'm getting it started. He's helping me. But once it starts getting dark, the noises. You start to hear the noises in the woods, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, Dad, what? You think there's bears around here? I'm like, oh yeah, there's bears around. He's like, you think they could smell the elk? I'm like, yeah, probably, So at that point, I'm like, why don't you do this, son? Hold the light for me and just keep an eye out, just keep flashing the light. So we sat there, and we got him quartered up, got him hung, I pulled a quarter down and the back straps, and we hiked out that night, and we came back to get the rest the next day, man. But it was a super awesome trip. He got to see Dad put an arrow in a bull, and everything went perfect. So that was one of those situations where the elk read the script. The shot was where it needed to be. It was in a good place, because it was all downhill from there.
Exactly.
To pack it out. So really cool trip, man. Really memorable trip with me and my oldest at that one. But that was a few years ago. He's been with me on a couple other since now, but he's
That's an amazing story. I'm jealous, man. I want to get my son out there now. Let me ask about the aspen. So you said it was a 4-inch gap. These trees, how tall was that gap? Like, was there north-south room, or were you talking like 4 inches left, right?
Yeah, 4 inches left and right, up and down those gap, all the way up and down, right? Because these trees, I don't know, they're probably 10 inches or so in diameter, and they grew together at the bottom, and then they separated as they went up. So I knew that tree was 39 yards, because it was a really weird looking tree, the way that it split like that from the bottom. And so at that gap where I shot, when he walked into it, I'm telling you, it was really tight, but the way that his body shape was, his body was high enough above the crook where I could see it. And it was weird, because as soon as I drew my bow back, my pin was floating from the tree to his fur, just back and forth. And I'm like, I'm going to nail this tree, and I'm going to smoke this bull, one of the two. And the shot broke, man, and it smoked him. So it was a good shot.
That's amazing, man. And you know what? I understand why your sons are such beasts. If you were holding a bow, an 80-pound bow for 2 minutes, I get the genes. I understand the genes of why your children are such monsters in the mountains as well. Because man, that's crazy. I've done some like 1.5-minute long holds, and it sucks. So 2 minutes, and I have a 72.5 pound bow. Yeah. Whew.
Well, so little side note, like I used to do, there was some events back in the day called Train to Hunt, where it was you did a pack out challenge, you did a 3D hunter hybrid course, and they did some really cool shots where you'd have to sit there and hold your bow for 30 seconds or a minute before you got to shoot the target. So I practiced a lot of that stuff. It was fun. Not always is it necessary, but I tell you what, when it counts, and I still had to let my bow down,
Yeah.
but it was one of those things that I'm telling you, if I didn't have the background with working on bows and shooting as much as I did, and I mean, there was a period in my life where I was shooting, I mean, thousands of arrows a month just prepping for some of these tournaments.
Yeah.
And so if I didn't have that back, I don't know that I don't want to do it again. Even I still shoot a 75 inch
Yeah.
pound bow, for hunting, but I tell you what, I'm very much going more towards that comfort stage with bows than the just
Yeah.
the brute force of trying to give him everything.
Yeah, man. As soon as you told me there's a 4-inch gap, but you saw his vitals, I was like, that's tough at 39, 40 yards. But man, I'm glad that you nailed it, and your son got to experience that with you. That's super
Yeah,
cool.
it was fun, man. That was a cool trip for sure.
what I want to hear? Well, do you remember what your son said, or remember you've seen it in the video? But like, what did he say? Because I'm sure he said something right when you nailed that bull.
I honestly, my son is quickly becoming the king of one-liners, with some of the stuff that comes out of his mouth, and his younger
Yeah.
brother is following suit because they hang out with each other. And honestly, growing up in an archery shop is probably not ideal for a lot of kids with some of the conversations that go on. So he matured pretty quickly with conversations
Yeah.
because he would hear a lot. And so I don't remember exactly what he said on that trip. It was funny. I do remember when we videoed it, but you got me. You got me curious. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that one again because even go through some of that old footage. That hunt I did put on my YouTube channel a few years back. It was a super cool trip, but
Yeah.
I don't remember. He's like I'm telling you, there's some witty stuff that my kids come up with that I'm like, where did you get that? Where do you even hear things like that?
Yeah.
But anyway,
That's
it's
good. I'll,
it's
I'll have to
fun.
watch
So
that video, man. I'm excited to see that. That'll be a good one. I'll try and find it and put a link to it in the show notes so everybody else can check it out too, because that's pretty
yeah,
awesome. Well, Phil, that was great. What else? I mean,
yeah,
I'll listen. I tell this to everybody. I'll listen all night.
yeah,
So if you got more stories for me, keep them coming. If not, we can wrap it up. It's up to you.
yeah. No, so I'll finish off with one more with my son. Right, kind of started with my dad. That second was me, and then so both my sons are they've hunted with me now. My youngest son is 9, so he's been more just we've been on a couple turkey hunts. Haven't been able to connect the dots yet there with him. Hopefully this spring we get to connect the turkey with him and hopefully into some big game soon. But my oldest son, I mentioned that turkey hunt with him, right? But
Yeah.
his this year was his first. Um, no, actually, it was his second. Actually, he hunted a lot. 2 years ago was his first big game season in Colorado. He's hunted Nebraska before that, but this last season he shot a doe, and it was perfect shot. The nerves and everything. I can remember my first time bow hunting. Man, I couldn't even see through the peep. I'm looking at. I went hog hunting in Texas just to try to go get some hunts in. I knew that I needed to get some experience, and it was a blur and it was a mess. And I shot 2 or 3 times over and under this pig, and he stood there at the feeder, and it, it was a circus, is what it was.
Yeah.
And my oldest son he's shot a couple does with his bow in Nebraska and in Colorado, but this last season in 2023, he connected on a doe. We made a stalking on the timber, and I'll tell you, it was controlled, and it was a well executed shot. It was a well placed shot. So the way it went down, we were elk hunting. We had mule deer tags in our pockets as well, and we were really pushing to try to get him a bull this year. We'd had a couple close calls. I'd called a few bulls into about 60, 65 yards. Couldn't pull them in any further. Well, we're sitting here in this hillside, and we can hear a bull above us. So we decided to make a move on him. We're moving in position. While we're going through there, we see this lone mule deer doe feeding through the timber. And it was one of those deals. We kind of passed quickly. She looked down, we caught her attention, and we just kind of scooted through the area quick. So she just let us go. Mule deer are funny sometimes. They just sit there and watch, or sometimes they take off. This one happened to just watch us go by. So we go and we try to get on these elk, and same thing. Another one of those situations where just couldn't quite connect the dots on this bull, and there was still about an hour worth of daylight left. And my son says, "Dad, you think we can get on that doe again? Because it's the last weekend of the season." And he's like, "I'd like to fill my tag with the doe if we can. I'm happy to do that." So I was like, "Okay, let's go."
Yeah.
So we start hiking back down the mountain in the area where we'd seen this doe, and sure enough, man, she probably hadn't gone 100 yards from where we saw her, just feeding through the timber, and we catch back up to her, and we catch sight of her about 100 yards. And I told my son, I said, "Look," I said, "you take the stock at your pace, move tree to tree. When she puts her head down, you move." I said, "Just." He's been on many stocks, learned a lot on a lot of stocks at this point, right?
Yeah.
So needless to say, hadn't connected on a stock, a successful one yet. So he starts working the stock, and I hung back, and I'm trying to film. I just had a GoPro at this point, and I'm just trying to film, and I'm watching him, and I'm really not paying attention to what I'm doing with the camera. And he's just moving slowly, and he's moving slowly, and he'd take 2 steps, and he'd stop, so finally he got about halfway between where I was and the doe was. And then at this point, he loaded his arrow. He's getting closer, and he just starts stalking slow, moving slow, and took his time. Well, he gets 30 yards, and I knew it. I didn't know he was close. I don't know how far he was because I hung back. He takes his rangefinder. I see him plugging the number on the rangefinder, drew his bow back, and he just settles in. And when you make a good shot and it's right in the boiler room, hitting behind your pin is something that I talk when I do seminars or I've done classes and stuff. Once you know that you can hit behind your pin, and when you make a mistake, you know what the mistake is. That's a huge accomplishment as an archer, because sometimes people, their pin flows, their pin moves, they have target panic, especially when an animal's in front of you. You get the pin close to the vitals and you're hammering away, right? So you really don't have good shot control. Watching him sit there and draw back and squeeze through that shot, I saw that deer crashing through the trees, and once the shot broke and she died, she probably went 80 yards and died. And we sat there, we're excited. I mean, he's excited. He's like, "I smoked her down right behind the shoulder." And it was one of those growth moments where I didn't learn that stuff till I was in my 30s, as a bow hunter. Because I can tell you that the first probably 5 to 7 years of me hunting, I was successful at times, but it was chaotic also at times, because you make a bad shot, you hit something in the guts, you hit it too high. And again, it's all those nerves and that anxiety with that us bow hunters deal with. It's part of what makes it exciting. So you don't want to kill it and completely numb it, because then it kind of takes the fun out of it, But to be able to start harnessing that and really being composed to make a good shot, I started to see him have steps and growth in that standpoint. So we go down there and we, get some pictures taken, and he had just gotten a new pack. He, got a new Kafaru pack, and he's like, "Dad, I need to pack something out." So it was a good moment, man. It was, as soon as we got done, I'm sitting there videoing him because I'm like, "Hey, well, you got your pack loaded now, so let's figure it out there." You wanted to carry some meat. We're going to carry some meat now. So it was a good trip, man. It was a meat hunt, not a trophy hunt, but at the same time, all the things that came into place with him growing as a young bow hunter, with having the maturity at 13, at that point, he was still 13, to make a good stock on a deer, wait for the right shot opportunity, wait for the broadside shot, put all the pieces together. That's some of the more rewarding things as a dad, knowing that, some of those moments where the last 5 or 7 years as I've been hunting, the questions come out. You'll get this, right? With your kids, they'll be, "Well, Dad, why did you do that? How come we didn't do this? How come you did it that way?" And a lot of times early on, I was like, "Well, that's just because that's the way I need to do it." And it's like, well, that's not a good enough answer for them, right?
Yeah, right.
I know with all my experiences and my failures and my whatever, it's led me to do what I do at a certain point in time. But he hasn't been with me with all those trips, and those experiences. So I've had to really back up sometimes and say, "Well, I did this because, in the past when I've done this, this has happened. And then this has happened. or you can expect to see this when this happens. So that's why when we get to this point, we try to do it this way. It's not that it's the right way. It's just the way that that's where I've gotten to be. Right.
Yeah.
So it's very much kind of reliving a lot of your lessons as a hunter, and to try to again get your kids further on than we get, or we are,
Yeah.
and get them there sooner. So to see him having that success very early on, man, I tell you, it's been exciting and it's been fun to see, and I can't wait. Like I said, my little guy, he's starting to show the interest in the bug for more of it as well. And we've just recently been on a couple goose hunts. I've never grown up goose hunting. One of my business partners with the Hunt Expo, he's a huge waterfowl guy, so he's taking us out. So my little guy, he's really showing a lot of interest with doing things. Loves to shoot guns, loves to shoot his bow.
Yeah.
But I would just say that if anything, on the dad side with your kids as they get older, and you have one or two, sorry.
I have two. I have a 5-year-old boy and a 2-year-old girl.
So the biggest thing is, like, both my kids, although they're very outdoors related, different pace with different things. My
Yeah.
youngest son, he was like 6, 7 years old. He's mad when he didn't get to go. And
Yeah.
now my younger one, 8 into 9 years old, now he's starting. He's like, well, I want to go shoot a turkey. I want to go fishing. Let's go. So
Yeah.
it's different pace with things, and I've got to, like I said, I've got to relive a lot of memories that I had almost forgot about at times, with things that
That's
I
amazing.
screwed up in the past. So it's good, man. It's fun. It's been rewarding to be able to share those experiences with my kids, and even having my dad and my sons on trips together now has been really fun. So I'm
That's too cool.
excited to hear some of your stories as your kids get older, man, because it's one of those things that I enjoy that stuff almost more than anything now, because you get to see kids are so innocent, and there's so
Yeah.
much that they'll tell you the truth, even when you don't want to hear the truth.
Yeah.
And so it's fun to see. It's fun to relive that stuff. So I'm excited for you.
Dude, Phil, I loved that story for a bunch of different reasons. And I know you haven't listened to all the episodes of the podcast. You listened to a couple. I don't know if you've heard me say this before, but like I'm an adult onset hunter, new to it, been doing it for a few years. I don't care how good of the hunting I get. I'm gonna do my damnedest to be the best I can be, so that I can teach my children these things. Like that's my end goal, is like making my children stone cold killers or whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
And so like your story, I had goosebumps. And if some random guest told me the story about how they went and shot this doe and laid it out, how they went out, they snitted the stock, shot the doe, perfect hard shot, it would have been whatever. But you telling the story from your perspective of seeing your son do all of these things that you taught him over the years, and then just have this like perfect moment of like zen, right? Where your
Yeah.
child's like, he's listening, he's been listening, he did
Yeah.
everything that I've been teaching him. That was perfect. Like that is a beautiful story, based on the exact circumstance that you experienced, man. That was awesome. I love that story, and it makes me really excited about taking my kids out. Which I need to get them. I need to get my son out at least for a turkey hunt or something this year. So
And sorry.
that's okay. I was just basically saying how your story's amazing, and I need to get my kids out. That was, it's not your typical like great hunting story, but like if you're a father, it's the perfect hunting story.
100%. You got to be in that role to really truly appreciate that, I think. And I appreciate you. Enjoy. It's something that I've been on more hunts lately with my older son specifically, and like I said, I got some trips planned with my younger son as well.
Mm,
But your time almost takes a back seat for a time as a hunter,
yeah,
and I'm okay with that. I've done that more with my older son, because we've been out whitetail hunting quite a bit. Like I said, he's been hunting whitetail since he was 10, and I know that I put him first. And there's certain trips where I'm like, okay, this one's Dad's trip. I'm going to go out and I'm going to go for 2 or 3 days, right? But 2 or 3 other trips before and 1 or 2 after, he's with me.
yeah,
And he's to the point now where, like I said, my older son, I can put him in a tree, I can put him in ground, I can put him wherever on his own, and I can go do my stuff now too. But I know that now, this coming season, hopefully, and the season after that, my little guy's going to be with me again. But it's going to be fun now, because now I can get my older son, hey, winds this way. We're going to do, you go sit this spot. I'm going to go sit this spot
Yeah.
with your brother, and try to start getting him up to speed, because when the three of us get out there and do our own thing, you know how it is, man. Even though,
Yeah.
and if you're kind of late into getting into hunting, if you grew up in it, Dad's great for a lot of things, but there's comes a point in time where you're like, okay, Dad, I got this. Or you think you know more than Dad, or you can do it better than your dad. And there's a time that you will be able to do that.
Yeah.
And when I felt like I had that interaction with my dad, I enjoyed having one of my uncles there with me, because I kind of looked at him as an equal, and he's the one that we kind of got into archery hunting together. But we hunted and fished together a ton. And it's not that I didn't appreciate my dad's part of it, but you know how it gets a point in time where you don't want to hear so much from Dad. You still
Yeah.
respect Dad and want to enjoy it, but at that point, it's like, hey, I got this. I've been around a few times enough. I'm
Yeah.
going to figure this out on my own, if nothing else. So
Yeah.
being able to get them to that point where they can continue to learn and make mistakes on their own, I'm going to be excited for that too, because I've been laughed at a few times with some of my mistakes from my kids, and we're going to be able to share in some of those stories both ways, because it happens to all of us. When you hunt
Absolutely.
fish. So,
Absolutely,
but yeah, man,
Phil.
that's what I like when I was thinking about kind of how, like I said, some of the podcasts I've listened to years before and the different stories. I just felt it was a good sprinkle with some of my, where I started with my dad, getting him out, and then with my one of my sons so far. So
Yeah. No, you threaded those three stories together really nicely. So thank you, Phil.
yeah,
I
for sure, man.
appreciate you coming on the podcast, man. This was a ton of fun.
Yeah,
And man, like I said, that last story gave me goosebumps. It made me excited to like teach my son and like hopefully get to experience exactly that someday. Just him putting the perfect stock on a little meat hunt. So,
yeah.
well, Phil, yeah, let's wrap this thing up, man. I know that's the last story you got for us. Why don't you tell the people where they can find you? Whether it's, I don't know, Instagram, YouTube. I know we got the Mile High Hunt Expo coming up, so you just let them
Yeah.
know where to go.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I mean, I, I don't post a ton on social. I have some people on the No Limits Archery side that take care of that stuff for me. I'm on Instagram. I do post some stuff, Phil Mendoza, and then Facebook. But yeah, the most recent project I'm really excited about, been working for over a year now with this, is a Mile High Hunt and Fish Expo coming April 5th through the 7th to the Gaylord Rockies here in the Front Range of Colorado. I've been, man, I've been a attendee of trade shows all across the country in the outdoor
Hmm.
world, just with the shop and on the tournament side, and as a consumer. And in no way, shape, or form am I dogging on any other business or platform or shows in this area. I just feel like what's been here is not a great representation of what a good trade show can be.
Okay.
And with that being said, man, we've got real manufacturers coming into the building this April. We've got rifle companies, we've got waterfowl companies, we've got awesome guest speakers coming. We've got a film festival on the Friday night of the event. We got a podcast area, so if you want to come set up, man, we got a couple spots. You can come down and throw some podcasts there on site if you'd like to. And we've got elk calling competitions, we've got waterfowl calling competition, turkey calling competitions, and honestly, one of the biggest draws that we haven't done a good enough job of talking about is the drawings that we have for the expo. We have and we got rifles, we got high end rifles, right? I mean,
Yeah.
$2,000, $2,500 plus type of rifles,
Oof.
shotguns, bows. We've got gear packages, packs. Davis Tents, one of the partners contributing that stuff with us. We've got on the expo side, we've got a hog hunts in Texas. We've got mountain lion hunts in Arizona. We've got some other trips, waterfowl trips, and elk hunts we're working on here. So, needless to say, you need to come check it out.
Yeah.
I've been to so many good shows across the West, and this is a smaller show to start for sure compared to some of those bigger shows. But having companies like Hoyt and Elite and Prime, and with Prime now is Montana Rifle, First Light, Meat Eater, Phelps Calls, Dave Smith Decoys, Badlands, Kafaru. We're partnered with Ducks Unlimited and Muley Fanatic Foundation. We've got companies like Gunworks and Altera rifles and Viking armament and iRay and Zeiss and Leica and Maven. Man, I'm telling you that you want to talk about manufacturers coming into Colorado. We've never seen manufacturers like this at a trade show. So
That's awesome.
people, if anything, I would highly encourage you to come check, look at our website. Our exhibitor list will be up here soon. It's end of February as we're recording this, but I think the late first week of March, we're going to have the exhibitor list up on the website. You can purchase tickets right now. And we got a bank conservation banquet Saturday night. Derek Wolf, former Broncos, partnering with us on that deal. I'm telling you, man, that hunting is so much of a social. There's a big social element, I should say, with hunting. The people you hunt with, the stories that we're talking about, like today. These trade shows, if you haven't been, are just an extension of that. Maybe products that you've used as an sportsman and an outdoorsman. Getting to see some of the manufacturers that actually make and sell those products, sometimes just reaching across and shaking somebody's hand saying, hey, I had a successful trip because of your product, or your product helped me prolong my experience in the woods, whatever it is. So being able to connect those dots, I'm telling you, I haven't been this excited about a project I've worked on since I opened the archery shop back in 2009. So this is something that my business partner, Abe, and I, we've been grinding, man. It's been a ton of work, a ton of phone calls, a ton of emails, and that's where seeing it all come together now and seeing how close we are, we're excited. It's something that we are hearing the buzz and the chatter of how excited people are to see it and come together now. So again, I mean, we're going to start off a little smaller than some of these bigger ones, but still have just shy of 200 exhibitors represented in the building this first year. We have the ability to grow to more than double in size, but we got to start. We got to build the right foundation. And there's going to be some outfitters. Yeah, there's going to be some outfitters in the building, but we've limited that based off of region and species, and really focused on the manufacturers and the middleman, as like I am. No Limits Archery is a middleman to the big manufacturers and the consumer, right? So having that representation in the building with companies like One Shot Gear and some of the other gun dealers in the area that are the middleman between the consumer and the manufacturer. There's a little bit of everything. Heavy big game, heavy gear. I would say that waterfowl is probably the next biggest category to big game. And then the fishing element, there's some fishing element sprinkled in as well. It's going to be a party, man. I mean, if nothing else,
excited.
Yeah, so it'll be a good show. Just from a standpoint of before the show's even started, we've already done so much more for this type of event than, like I said, that has been here before. So at this point, we just need to get people to come experience it with us. To help us grow.
Yeah, I will be there. I'll tell you that. Why don't you share the date? I know the date because it's my wife's birthday, which she has given me permission to attend. So I will be there. Awesome. But why don't you share the date and maybe like the website?
Yeah, so April 5th through the 7th, we're a Friday, Saturday, Sunday show. The website is milehighhuntexpo.com. Like I said, you can get tickets there. You can even book a room through there with a room discount if there's still rooms available. When you get on, they're starting to run out. But again, you can buy tickets to the conservation banquet there. We've got a Wyoming commissioner's tag coming to that banquet. We've got an ibex hunt in Spain. We've got elk hunt, a velvet elk hunt in Arizona, whitetail hunts, waterfowl trips. Man, I'm telling you, there's a ton of stuff that we've worked to bring to the table with fundraising for conservation in mind, and to also put some dollars towards organizations like CRWM, who's really at the forefront of the fight with, just preserving our hunting rights here in Colorado, but really across the West too.
That's awesome. So, that's awesome. Well, I have not bought my ticket yet, but I will. And to any listener listening to this to get to this point, first person to reach out to me, I'll buy a ticket for you guys as well. So
I'll tell you what, how long before you think you put the podcast up?
It'll be out in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from today.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and give your listeners a promo code, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, no, it's fine by me. First promo code we've ever had. Woo!
I dig it, man. So let's do. How about let's just make it easy? HS 2024, right?
All right.
Hunting Stories 2024. So if you go to our website, milehighhuntexpo.com, and you click on the buy your ticket or purchase a ticket, once you go through the process of loading your ticket in the cart, I'll take a few bucks off your general admission passes. If you enter the promo, just keep it all caps, make it simple, HS 2024, and I'll get that promo code loaded. And like I said, throw some of the listeners a little bit of a discount there. And
Perfect, man. Appreciate that.
yeah, we'll see if we can't help some people out get there and give us a chance. Give us an opportunity to earn your business and see
Yeah.
if we can't keep growing this thing.
Perfect, Phil. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I've mentioned that I am going, but I've actually never been to an event before. So what I'm
Really?
hoping is that when I go to this event, this ruins all the rest of them for me. And they're all just, I'm like, why waste my time going to any more? We got this one. So,
Well, we're going to give it a shot.
perfect, Phil. Well, thank you again. I appreciate your time. Nice to know that we're neighbors. Let's maybe go shoot bows, or I'll buy you a beer sometime soon. But thank you again, man. I really do appreciate your time. And you told some amazing stories today. So
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, that's it. Another couple stories in the books. I want to thank Phil for sharing with us, taking some time to sit down with us. He really put those stories together nicely, and it was really fun to listen to all the stories that he has to tell. I'm sure we'll have Phil back on in the future, as I'm sure he has plenty more stories to tell. But I want to thank you, Phil, for coming on the podcast. As for you listeners, thank you guys for tuning in. Again, I apologize for the audio quality. I was trying something new. It didn't work, and I'm going to make sure I get back to my microphone. So sorry about that. But please make sure you guys check out all the links in the show notes to the Mile High Hunt Expo, to No Limits, to Phil. And if you are in the Denver area at the beginning of April, or you want to come to the show and you're not from the area, use my promo code. Hit me up on Instagram. I'd love to meet you and check out the show with you. So thank you guys very much for tuning in. Now get out there and make some stories of your own.